Hey everybody, good Tuesday morning. Hope it's going well for you so far. We are back to talk about more post-June 1st cuts around the league. Yesterday morning we went over the first 8 teams and the post-June 1st cuts they could make to save money. Now we're going to take a look at the next 8 teams. So if you're unfamiliar with the concept of a post-June 1st cut, go watch the video I posted yesterday morning if you want to see what players I discussed for any team that plays in a city starting with A, B, or C. If you want to see the players they might cut, go watch the video I posted yesterday morning. So once again, before we get into things, however, I do want to reiterate that most of the players that I list in this video are not going to get cut, and a decent chunk of them never would. A decent chunk of them are too valuable to the team, are too inexpensive, relatively speaking, and for one reason or another, the team would rather restructure somewhere else than have to cut some of these players. But I think that in the event of a financial pinch that some teams are going to find themselves in this offseason, you could see some of these guys end up on the market just by virtue of the fact that the team's trying to cut costs. And sometimes those cutting costs moves are painful. Yesterday's video, I had one comment saying there's no way the Falcons are ever going to let Russell Gage go to save a few $1,000,000. And that person is probably right. It would be painful to let Russell Gage go over a couple $1,000,000, but that's kind of the point. The cap went down. Things are going to be a little painful this offseason compared to the usual. So never say never. We can safely assume that like the Packers would never cut Aaron Rodgers. Now, they might trade him, but a lot of stuff is on the table when it comes to trying to get under budget. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and jump right in, taking a look at the teams starting with a D, that play in a city starting with a D, and see who they could cut to free up cap space. Okay, the Dallas Cowboys are first on the list. They don't really have too many good options. I kind of don't think they're going to cut anybody this offseason, but keep an eye on them next offseason because they're about to be hitting the wall pretty hard. Dak just got paid. They're giving all that money to Zeke and Cooper, and it's going to be a bloodbath at some point for that team's salary cap, I think, but not this offseason. As for who they could cut if they absolutely had to, here are some guys. Anthony Brown, cornerback, 27 years old. He's due about $5.8 million this year. You could reduce that to $3.3 million if you cut him, so nice way to save $2.5 million. I think Anthony Brown's a pretty good player. I doubt they would do this, but it's one way to get under to get under the cap if you end up having to. Next, we have Leighton Van Der Esk, a linebacker, 25 years old, who the Cowboys just declined the fifth-year option on. So it kind of seems like the Cowboys are already thinking we want to go another direction. They did draft a lot of linebackers in the draft last week, so it would not surprise me if they were ready to move on from Leighton Van Der Esk. More likely they let him play out this year and then let him go. But if you let him go after June 1st, you'd be talking about a $1.7 million cap hit, which would save you about $2.1 million. Probably not enough savings to let go of a good young linebacker, but I think one way or the other they are probably going to be done with him. Next up, Connor Williams. He's a guard, 23 years old. Not a great player, but he's played a decent amount for them on that offensive line that's had so many injuries lately. So, again, this is another guy I would not expect him to let go. But if you do, you save about $2.5 million. You go down from a $3 million cap hit to $500,000. So that's on the table. Next up, we have Greg Zuerlein, their kicker. He's 33 years old. He did not have a great year last year. And if you cut him, you can save $2.1 million. Cap hit goes down from $2.8 million to $700,000. So if they find a younger, cheaper kicker who they like, don't be completely surprised. Then we have Dalton Schultz, their starting tight end last year. He had a really nice season, so I seriously doubt they would cut him, but they are getting Blake Jarwin back, so it would not be the most shocking thing in the world if they decided, hey, Dalton Schultz had a nice year for us, but he's just not going to get on the field enough for us, and we can save $2.2 million if we let him go, so let's just do that. He's due $2.3 million against the cap this year. He'll be due about $110,000 dead if cut. And finally, for them, we have Randy Gregory, who's kind of in a interesting position here. He's a 28-year-old edge player who might finally be able to play football now that the NFL has relaxed their marijuana rules. But it's not like he's gotten his career off to the best potential start. He's clearly not completely what the Cowboys were hoping for when they drafted him. And you could get down from a $2.2 million cap hit to a $100,000 cap hit if you let him go. So the Cowboys may very well be looking. Ooh, okay, we have another player for the Cowboys. One more. Cedric Wilson, wide receiver, 25 years old. He's decent, but the Cowboys have a lot of receivers. So you could let him go and get down to a $2.2 million cap hit, or from a $2.2 million cap hit to no dead money at all. Worth considering if the Cowboys find themselves a couple mil short of the line. All right, let's move on to team number 2 today, the Denver Broncos. They have some interesting options, but unless the Packers are willing to trade them Aaron Rodgers, I don't think they're going to need to do anything because their cap situation's pretty good. If they trade for Aaron Rodgers, then they're going to have to let some guys go, and it's going to hurt, but it'll be worth it. Number one guy would be Bryce Callahan, 29-year-old cornerback, due $8.5 million this year. You could trim down by about $7 million if you cut him, $6.8 million. So big savings there. That would probably be the first guy on the block if they traded for Rodgers. Next up, we have A.J. Johnson. He's a middle-aged linebacker, 29 years old, sitting on a $3.4 million cap hit that is fully non-guaranteed, so you can cut him and owe him nothing. We have Tim Patrick. He's in the same spot, I think. Yeah, he's a 27-year-old wide receiver, due $3.4 million this year, zero dead cap if cut, fully non-guaranteed. Now, Tim Patrick is good and valuable, so I seriously doubt Denver would do this, but desperate times sometimes call for desperate measures, and if they trade for Aaron Rodgers, they may find themselves in that desperate measures. Cortland Sutton, this is another one that's just not going to happen unless we have the craziest offseason ever. He's a young, talented, really good wide receiver. But if you want to look at it in a pure number standpoint, you could get down from a $2.9 million cap hit to $760,000 if you let him go. Never going to happen. I arguably shouldn't have even listed him because it would just be crazy to actually release Cortland Sutton over $2.1 million. Josie Jewell, young linebacker, reserve linebacker, 26 years old. Due $2.4 million, goes down to $180,000 if cut, so decent way to save $2.2 million. And we also have Desean Hamilton here, wide receiver, 26 years old, another reserve player. You can save about the same if you cut him, about $2.2 million. So if Denver trades for Aaron Rodgers, look for some of these options to get put on the table. If they don't, then they don't need to do anything because they don't have a lot of big salaries on their books right now. All right, so let's move on to team number 3 for the day, the Detroit Lions. And they have a few interesting options, but not that many. The first guy that caught my eye as a logical cut candidate would be Tracy Walker. He's a 26-year-old safety. I don't think he plays that much. Right now, he's due $2.4 million against the cap. If you cut him, you would save about $2.2 million, get down to $200K. So if the Lions, who are in kind of a weird offseason because they did the Stafford for Goff trade, if the Lions found themselves in a bad financial spot for one reason or another, and they did just extend Frank Ragnow, so it's not impossible, they could do that. Then you have Tyrell Crosby. He's a young reserve tackle for them, 25 years old. You could get down from a $2.3 million cap hit to a $70,000 dead cap hit if you cut him. And that's really all I could find for the Lions. They didn't have very many appealing options. Okay, let's move along. We have ourselves the Green Bay Packers. And look, I kind of listed this first one just for the meme because I really want to see what Aaron Rodgers would do if the Packers cut his best receiver. I want to see Aaron Rodgers after the Packers cut Devonte Adams to save $13.2 million. It's not going to happen. What you might see is them extend Devonte Adams so this year's cap hit's a little lower. But technically speaking, Devonte Adams, 28-year-old wide receiver, you could save $13.2 million if you cut him against the cap. So look for them to do something in terms of an extension to try to reduce this cap hit a little bit if they need to. But yeah, they're not going to cut him, but we can dream, right? All right, we got Dean Lowry, a defensive end, relatively young, 26 years old, due $6.3 million in 2021. Only due $1.5 million if cut. Decent option. I don't think Dean Lowry plays that much for them, so If the Packers need some extra money this offseason, look for them to do this. They also have Robert Tonyan Jr., who had a good year last year. I don't think they're going to want to move on from him right after he had a breakout year, but we know that Aaron Rodgers makes some of these players look a lot better than they are, so he might not be anything more than a slightly above average warm body. So if you lose Rodgers and the opportunity comes for you to save $3.5 million, you might take it to move on from Robert Tonyan. Speaking of other players that Rodgers throws passes to, we have Marquez Valdez-Scantling, young wide receiver who's been relatively productive so far in his NFL career, but not really that productive. He's certainly no future stud or anything like that. It doesn't seem like at this point. Probably good enough to keep around for the low price of $2.2 million. But in a pinch, you could save basically that whole $2.2 million by cutting him. Get down to a $50,000 dead cap hit, which is nothing. So if things get ugly this offseason for them financially, look for them to maybe do that. We have Chandon Sullivan, 24-year-old cornerback. Currently due $2.1 million. No dead cap hit. They could just let him go and move on. No dead money whatsoever. Definitely look for him to be on the chopping block if the Packers work themselves into a weird cap situation because of a Rodgers trade. But unless they do move Rodgers, I think this team is going to be fine financially. So as of right now anyway, I don't really look for them to do all that much. But seriously though, can we get a Devonte Adams cut up in here? That'd be fun. You think Rodgers is mad now? See what happens. See what happens. Okay, we're going to move on to our next team. We have the Houston Texans, and this is a team that is an absolute mess. They could do just about anything right now, and it would not surprise me, right? I know they fired Bill O'Brien, but they got a star quarterback who wants to get out of there, and he might not have value, so who the hell knows what's going to happen here. But here are some guys they could save money on if they cut. And because of the Deshaun Watson situation, I think anything is on the table. That team is going to be bad this year, and they need to cut cost if they're going to really dump Deshaun Watson because he's due all that money. So the first guy, and this guy's kind of a slam dunk, take it home cut, Marcus Cannon, an aging offensive tackle, due $7 million this year. Do nothing if you cut him. $7 million savings right then and there. I think you can pretty much pencil this one in. Marcus Cannon, get out of here. Moving along, we have Tyrod Taylor. Now, if the Houston Texans move on from Watson, they probably need Tyrod Taylor around. But nominally, you could save about $2.8 million against the cap if you cut him. 5.3 to 2.5. So, got to consider it. Okay, now we have Malik Collins, former Cowboy, young defensive tackle, 26 years old. Due $4.7 million this year. Only do $2 million if you cut him, so you could save about 2.7. They just signed him though, so I doubt they're going to move him. It's kind of like moving on from Philip Lindsay. You just got him, so probably not. Brendon Dunn, a little different, however. He's a middle-aged defensive end, 28 years old, $4.1 million against the cap this year. Only $1 million dead if you move on. So I definitely look for the Houston Texans to consider doing that if they find themselves in a bad monetary situation, which they probably will. Desmond King is next. He's due $3.2 million against the cap this year. He's only 26 years old. He's a really good nickel corner, or at least he has been in the past. But it's not impossible to imagine they cut him to take the $500K dead cap and save 2.7. If there's any team that could end up in a very desperate situation this offseason, it's probably the Texans. All right, now we have Justin Reed. He's a young free safety, 24 years old. Due $2.7 million this year and due only $260,000 if cut. So look for the Texans to consider that. Then we have Christian Kirksey, linebacker, 28 years old. Due $2.6 million in non-guaranteed money if on the team this year. So do nothing if he's not. So definitely a possibility here of the Texans moving on if they want to save $2.5 million. Camus Grugier Hill is next. Linebacker, 26. Due $2.4 million and do nothing if cut. Fully non-guaranteed. So that's another reasonable option. Here's one that I really would be interested in if it happened. Jordan Akins. He's a very unique tight end in that he lines up wide a lot, which most tight ends don't do. I made a video discussing players like Jordan Akins last year. He's 29, so he still has something left. He's a quality veteran. and the Texans could save over 2.2 million if they cut him. 2.2 million. That might be appealing if they end up having to move on from Watson and pay him a ton of money this season. So look for that. AJ Moore, young safety, $2.1 million cap hit this year. Do nothing if cut. So Houston has a lot of good cutting options, and they need them because, yeah, that team, yikes, that team is in a bit of trouble this offseason. So look for some of these guys to shake free in the next couple of months. All right, next team we have the Indianapolis Colts. And this is a team that's in a pretty good financial situation right now, as near as I can tell. So I don't think they're going to have to do anything, but you know, whoa, excuse me, you never know. So with that in mind, let's march forward. First guy, our old buddy, Mark Glowinski, middle-aged guard, 29 years old. Due $7.6 million against the cap this year, due only $1.4 million if cut. So if the Colts find themselves in financial trouble, it will hurt them, but you better believe they will consider moving Glowinski and saving $6.2 million. Also considering Kenny Moore, young cornerback, 25 years old, due $6.4 million this year, completely non-guaranteed. No dead money if cut. If Indy needs money, look for this guy to be one of the first sacrificial lambs. Also, maybe the easiest one to do here, Jack Doyle, aging tight end, 31 years old, due $5.8 million this year, only due $1 million if cut after June 1st. So you can save almost $5 million by moving on from an aging tight end when you have a guy like Mo Alley Cox waiting in the wings to take over. Speaking of Mo Alley Cox, technically he would be a candidate for this list because as a 27-year-old tight end, he is due $3.4 million and due nothing if cut. But I would much sooner expect the Colts to move on from Doyle than Mo Alley Cox because of the age gap. Okay, now we have Zach Pascal, wide receiver, 26 years old. I think he was a Panther a couple years ago. I think I remember that. I'm not 100% sure on that. But he's due $3.4 million in non-guaranteed money. So you could cut him and owe him nothing. So that's another candidate. Braden Smith, young offensive tackle, due $3.3 million, $830,000 dead if cut. So $2.5 million savings. We have Sam Tevi, offensive tackle, 26 years old, due 3.2 and due 1 million if cut. So very similar to Braden Smith. And then we have George Odom, a middle-aged, youngish safety, 27 years old, due 2.1 million if on the team and nothing if cut. So if the Colts found themselves in a bad spot, these are some reasonable options. I think they actually have some really logical candidates to cut, like I said, Jack Doyle, but I don't think as of right now they're going to need to, so we'll have to see. Okay, moving on to our next team here, we have the Jacksonville Jaguars, and I'm going to say it right now, the Jaguars don't really need to cut anybody because they're so far under the cap, it would just be pointless. That being said, they do have some guys they could save a lot of money on if they cut, so if they suddenly decide, I don't know, they want to trade for Aaron Rodgers or something stupid like that, they could make it work. Let's take a look at some of these guys who they could cut if somehow, some way they found themselves needing the money. Andrew Norwell's the lead candidate. He's due $15 million this year. He's a good guard, 29 years old. Only due $3 million if cut, so $12 million in savings right there. You have Brandon Linder. He's due $8.5 million in this year, where he'll be 29 years old. Due nothing if cut. And then you have A.J. Kahn, the other well-respected guard on this Jacksonville team. Another 29-year-old, due $6.3 million, but only $1.3 million if cut. So, hey, if Jacksonville wants to completely decimate their offensive line right before Trevor Lawrence takes the field for them, they could save a ton of money in the process. But as of right now, there's no need to because they don't really have too many big contracts in Jacksonville. They don't have a ton of dead money. So, not counting on it, but I can think of some teams that would really like them to. All right. Next up, we have Josh Lambo. He's their 30-year-old kicker who's due $4.4 million this year, which is a lot of money for a kicker who is not one of the best in the league. You could cut him and save about $3.5 million, $3.5 million. Get it down to $900K, almost less than $900K. So that's a logical candidate. Jarrod Wilson, young safety on a cheap deal, $3.4 million. But you can save about $2.8 million if you cut him, get it down to about $600K. And that's it for the That's about it for the Jaguars. Again, they just don't need to, but they could. Why? I don't know, but I've seen crazier things happen. All right, Kansas City Chiefs are up next. They are doing a pretty good job balancing the books despite giving out massive contracts to a lot of players. Obviously, Mahomes restructured, but eventually this stuff is not going to keep working. They're going to have to make some tough decisions at some point. It might be this offseason, it might not. But here are some guys they could cut to save money this offseason after June 1st. We have Honey Badger, Tyrann Mathieu, 28-year-old safety, still a good player, but is he $20 million a year good? Because that's about what he's going to make against the cap this year. You could go down from $20 million to $5 million if you cut him. So you could save about $14.8 million if you cut him. So if Kansas City was in trouble, and they could get in trouble this offseason depending on what happens, you might see them. You might see them consider letting Honey Badger go. That's a lot of money. All right, we have Anthony Hitchens, 28-year-old linebacker, due $10.6 million against the cap this year. Only due 4.2 if cut after June 1st, so that's not a terrible option either. Anthony Hitchens is a pretty good player for them. I don't think they're going to be jumping up and down to do this, but it's on the table. We have Chavarrius Ward, young cornerback, 25 years old, due $3.4 million this year if on the team, and due nothing if cut. So they may consider doing that. We have Derek Nyandi. I think I pronounced that right. Defensive tackle, 25 years old, due $2.4 million if on the team, and only due $240,000 if cut. So you could save 90% of that $2.4 million. And then we have Byron Pringle, the Pringle man, the wide receiver, 27 years old, who is due $2.1 million if on the team, and due zilch if off the team. So chance to save $2.1 million and have no dead cap. And then we have Andrew Wiley, offensive tackle, also young. He's in the same position as Pringle. Only due $2.1 million if on the team, do nothing if off the team. And that's going to take us to the end of this video. Thank you for watching. Let me know what you think of these players. Who do you want to shake free? Who do you think is going to shake free? Do you see any of these guys as future Seahawks? Who does it for you? Who interests you? Let me know in the comments. Tomorrow we're going to come back with the next 8 teams. But yeah, let me know what you think about this batch. Who do you like?